Hello everyone, this is Anita from innerFLOW, and I'd like to welcome Sharon Peddie from Greyton in South Africa onto this call today. Hi Sharon.
Hi Anita. Hi everybody.
Lovely to have you with us and look forward to speaking about being the alchemist in your own life with you. Before we go into
Thank you.
Sure. Before we go into the actual discussion, I'd like to just introduce the audience for those of you who may be listening to these recordings for the first time. I'm the founder of innerFLOW, and innerFLOW really gave birth this year as a result to the need and meeting the need on a global context, as well as here in South Africa, to provide a platform of services from a diverse range of practitioners who have various different skills, experiences, talents, gifts, as we at a planetary level and an individual level are called during this time of this pandemic to turn inwards, and we are either forced or encouraged to discover or rediscover and repurpose our lives. And it could be from the minutiae all the way to the very grand design of our lives as we are having to adjust, adapt, and radically change the way of living, being in the world. And this opportunity has arisen, as well as this real need for servicing the overall well-being of individuals at this time. And each of our practitioners has various different services that they're offering. And these introductions are so that you, as the audience and the viewers, can get to hear from the practitioners themselves what it is that they're doing and how it might benefit you at this time. So we are going to be discussing with Sharon today what some of her offerings are, why she's been called to the work that she's doing, and I'd like to just take a little bit of time to talk through some of Sharon's background. So Sharon started her working life as a goldsmith many years ago and was always excited by what she describes as the hot melting process of mixing base metals and gold and all the wonderful chemical reactions used for colored metals, as well as the miraculous occurrence of gemstones in our wonderful earth. The fact of mineral-rich water seeping through layers of sand and rock under heat and pressure, forming extraordinary and varied crystals, was a constant source of fascination for her. And when her career as a chef began, the same fascination with the alchemy of such a variety of vegetables, herbs, and heat continued to enthrall her. And then, a few years ago, a kundalini awakening took Sharon by surprise. And here the alchemy of spirit really began, and she was humbled and awestruck by the power of the internal process she found herself in. The extraordinary abundance of what she calls Mother Nature was now flowing through her and burning up layers of dross, covering the gold of the natural state of being that resides within. So Sharon had always been a spiritual seeker, but never realized until this point that what she had been seeking was already there. There was nowhere to go, nothing to do, just be still and rest in spirit. Because the awakening to our God nature is not about belief, it's a lived experience. It is simply who we are. What a beautiful way of describing all these things that have woven their lives, like this tapestry that we're actually seeing behind you, this amazing tree, to find its way upwards, the ascension, but with these grounded roots of the earth and existence itself to keep one grounded here on the planet.
Mm.
Anything else you would like to add to that introduction?
Not really new. I'm Anita. Sorry. I think you've kind of summed it up. That is the process for me. Feeling very much rooted in the earth, rooted in our mother, and allowing her to flow through my being, and the joy and the peace that comes from that is something that I long to share with other people, which is why I'm drawn to the kind of work I am now doing, which is helping people through the process of Advaita. Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon. And for the audience who may be new to some of the terminology, we'll take a moment to just briefly touch on some of the words here of kundalini, awakening, the mother, the divine mother, etc. Because I think for those who may not have the same spiritual orientation, it's important to hear from Sharon how she might work with you from the place and orientation that you are at in your lives. You're able to perhaps just speak to the viewers a little bit about that?
Yes, I think the importance for me is to have an understanding that that God is not outside of ourselves. That's usually the first place that I start, so that people understand that a word like kundalini only means that your own divinity is beginning to rise through you and starting to open you to the truth of who you actually are. And it's quite an amazing process, but it's not everybody's process. But everyone can relate to the stages of development and to the divinity that they actually feel. But it's to bring that divinity that people see outside of themselves, to actually bring that in, so that it's embodied. And that's the joy of the kundalini process, is that you feel it so intensely in the body while the energy is rising and opening up the various chakra systems, which are just energy systems. They are what I like to view as balls of energy in different centers, in the power center, in the umbilical, like in the heart center, in the brow. And those are just, they're constant developmental processes that occur in those centers. And as you start to awaken to the divinity of who you are, those start to open and soften, and you start to not need to see them as balls of energy. They start to just be flow. There starts to be a flow through all of them. And yeah, that's what I like to do. I hope that has addressed the issues you were talking about, or the terms. And then Advaita Vedanta is it's called Self Enquiry. I call it radical Self Enquiry, because it's a process of asking a very simple question, which is, who am I? And that asking that question opens you to the truth of who you really are. And that's all that it really is just a constant bringing yourself back to asking, who is experiencing this? Is it me? Is it my body? Or is it my mind? Or is it something that is aware of both of those existing? And who is aware? And constantly taking yourself back into the pure awareness to see who's there. Is this body actually what I am? Or is this mind what I am? But there's so much more.
Thank you, Sharon. Now, it all sounds magnificent, and you and I have known each other in a personal capacity for many years. And also, I have had the privilege of witnessing your awakening into yourself, and your awakening to something. But I want to address and help address perhaps some of the fundamental, very realistic possibilities that could be some of the viewers' experiences right now, especially during this time of pandemic and lockdowns and a lot of unrest and actually chaos that's prevailing around the world, is that people might be saying, how can all of this actually help me in my life right now, where I could be suffering? I'm putting myself in the shoes of the viewer. I could be going through enormous challenges, crises, darkness, and not feeling godlike at all, or not feeling in touch with my own divinity at all. In fact, how is that going to help me practically? So maybe you could just speak into that quite challenging dilemma or question that could be, that many people could be facing right now. This thing of being here on earth and looking at divinity and maybe not being able to reconcile those two things right now in their lives so easily.
I think what you're basically pointing to is that people are in a state at the moment of high anxiety and high fear, and the process of Advaita Vedanta takes one into a place where you have some distance between you and the fear, and it's literally taking yourself into the observer stance, where you are sitting and you're watching that the fear is actually playing out. You don't try to get away from the fear, and you don't try to get away from the anxiety. You acknowledge that they are there, and but by acknowledging that they're there, you are recognizing that you are not it, and it's not all consuming. Whereas if you feel like you are completely identifying with the fear and you are bound up with the fear, the whole of you is bound up with the fear, then there's no escape from it, and you are so trapped by the fear and anxiety that you can't function, and you can't do a thing. But if you're able to recognize that there is fear, and you allow it, and you sit in it, and you sit still in it, and you allow it to burn, and you don't try to run away from it, you just see that there is fear. And in the seeing, you become two. You become, and I call this using the duality of the ego to actually bring you into the oneness, the freedom of oneness. Because by seeing that you are separate from your body and your mind, then you become two. And that in becoming two and looking, you realize that you are not your body or your mind. Therefore, the fear exists outside of you. So who is the one who's looking at it? And is the one who's looking at it also in fear and anxiety? And so there's this process of just deepening and deepening into looking at who is actually anxious. It's not trying to chase the anxiety away. It's not possible. We're living in a real anxious time. It's to run away from it is to try and avoid it, and avoiding things never ever works. It always creeps in through the side door when you're not looking. And I think the thing is to just sit in the anxiety, sit in the fear, know that they're real, know that you're having an anxiety reaction to fear for a reason. Anxiety is there to protect you. The ego uses anxiety to say, hey, something's not right here. I need to move away from this. This is not good. But there's nowhere to move to. The ego always needs you to move away. It needs you to move away to feel better about something. If you can move into yourself, into the divinity of yourself, into the stillness, into the still point where you are watching that something, that the fear is actually outside of you and there's nothing you can do about it, and you don't have to do anything about it. Then when you land in that still place, everything quietens down, everything softens, and you accept that there is nothing you can do, and the anxiety melts away. And that is a way in which you can use Advaita to help you to land in the acceptance place that this is outside of you. It's an outside, it's something imposing on your life, and trying to do something about it is not going to work. Sitting in it and allowing it to be there just allows it to burn up, and then there's this beautiful stillness that appears in the place of it.
Thank you, Sharon. So Sharon, Advaita Vedanta, a broad, deep subject. How is it that you work practically with people in this regard?
Well, I do one-on-one sessions with people where they come, they come to talk to me about something, about an issue. Invariably, people are in a state of suffering, and what happens is that in that state of suffering, they externalize everything. There's always a reason why they are suffering. There's a reason outside of themselves, and I take them through a process of that's why I call it radical self-inquiry, through a process of total responsibility for what's happening to you, and where you're not looking outside of yourself for the answers. You're looking inward to find how am I not so much attracting this, but how am I creating this environment for my life to be playing out in the way that it is. So am I in a relationship with someone where it's feeling abusive? What am I doing? How am I bringing myself to that relationship, and how am I expecting my partner to show up? What outside pressures am I putting on that relationship that is creating the tension? Like what is going on here? So it's kind of working with the issue, but to really drill down into how are you not attending to yourself? How are you not showing up for yourself? How are you not totally loving yourself? Because if you're not coming from a place of absolute love for yourself, with an ability to love yourself completely unconditionally, then you cannot take yourself into the world and expect everyone else to love you unconditionally. So yeah, so that's kind of what the framework of how I work with people is, just to bring them back to that. When I talk about divinity, if you think about a baby when it is born, and it's born into the mother feeding it, and there's this feeling of absolute unconditional love, and the baby has come from unconditional love, come through this radical apparent, I call it an apparent separation from source, and now there's this mother who's giving this love in the form of food, and that's the first nurturing, is the food. And we know that feeling of unconditional love. So when we have all these layers of stuff put on top of us for years and years and years, when we get to have our own relationships, and all of a sudden this poor person who we're in relationship with has to hold all of that stuff that we're bringing. And if we are able to take ourselves back through all the layers, uncover everything, and find our own divinity, and find the way in which we can nurture ourselves totally, then we don't need our partners to show up in that way. And it's a beautiful thing to do, because I find a lot of people, most of the problems come from relationships actually. And a lot of people have, they are on an individual journey, but what usually gets them there is dissatisfaction in a relationship or in a job environment or something that that pushes them to be asking, oh, there's got to be something better than this. There's got to be a way out of this suffering. And I think it's that we know that unconditional love is our birthright, and divinity is our birthright, and joy is our birthright. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. So tell me about some of the other services that you're offering through innerFLOW, and perhaps you can just give an indication of how you work with them and what's on offer.
Okay. I've been a chef in a retreat center for very many years, and I've worked with people's very specific diets. People often come with allergies to foods that are very they're debilitating, and the allergy is not helping the person to become who they want to be, or who they truly are. And so it's a limitation. So I work with people's diets to support them on that journey, so that they feel held in that way, and they feel like the body is okay. The body can relax into the retreat space. And so what I'm offering is do cooking for retreats, according to people's diets, just to support people in that way. And anything from sort of 8 to about 20 people a retreat is quite comfortable for me. And offering to travel to wherever the retreat is happening. Obviously that would be built into the price. I'm in Brayton, in a tiny little village in the Western Cape, but I'm happy to travel all over the place to do catering. But one thing I really wanted to talk about in terms of the catering is that more and more in my own being, I'm discovering, I've been a vegan for quite a few years, but and nearly my entire life vegetarian before that. And I've found in the last while through the vegan process, I've actually started to drop my ideas about veganism, mostly because I'm more interested in the energetic quality of food. And I've found that a lot of vegan food is lacking in that energetic, what I'm looking for in that energetic quality of the food. A lot of things are dried, powdered. It feels like it's lost something along the way. It's not feeling like live food. And I'm more drawn to the life that is held in the food, and also the life that I put into, the spirit that I bring to the food. I always pray over my food before I serve it, mostly as a cleansing ritual, but also just because it imbues the food and imbues the water in the food with a beautiful program of prayer, not a program of because often I'm in a terrible hurry while I'm cooking, and the hurry, I don't want the hurry and the anxiety of the hurry to end up in the food. So for me, that's the important part of it. And so at the end of the preparation of the food, there's a prayer and a slowing down that goes into that. And that for me is the most important part of any kind of catering. So yeah, so that's
cooking
what I bring.
With love, in essence.
Yes, cooking with love. And
Wonderful.
loving cooking. Yeah.
The love is stirred in the pot.
It's my real true love, cooking.
I have sampled it on a number of occasions with great delight, and what joy that you're putting forward these services. And we hope up here in Gauteng we'll be able to invite you to come up and cook for a retreat that we are that we would love to host and hold here in the future for our innerFLOW customers. And
Wonderful.
Tell me a little bit about the roots of this journey, this alchemic journey, which then translated into the making of bespoke jewelry.
So that began many, many years ago. I was a goldsmith, like before I gave up being a goldsmith to become a chef. It was 25 years that I was a goldsmith, and it was I don't know, I seem to land in things by accident, and it really was one of those when I sort of landed up being a goldsmith. I wanted to be a mechanic, actually, which is an interesting twist. And I decided that I actually needed something. I needed a creative outlet, but I needed something very physical, because I understand the physical world. Really in depth, I understand the physical world. And so that's been where I've lived most of my life, is in that physical world. But what really fascinated me was all those alchemical processes that the metal would go through. And there are these wonderful things. There's a process called niello, and it's used a lot in Indian jewelry. It's like a bluish tinge that is in the recesses of like a piece of jewelry, where it's etched, and then you've got the silver showing through, and this bluish tinge. And it's made from silver and lead and sulfur. And it's the weirdest combination, and a really stinky thing to make, and quite toxic. But when you make it, it creates this unbelievable, hard, crushable, almost like rock, but it's made from these two metals. But the addition of sulfur turns it into this crumbly, and you break it up into powder and you put it into the recess and then warm it. And as it warms, it flows and creates this beautiful bluey, shiny bluey metal. And it's indescribable, but it was those processes that I found them almost intoxicating. They're so exciting. And yeah, so there was always that thread running through everything. And that stayed with me. And that same feeling flows through everything that I do. And so when I want to make a piece of jewelry, it feels to me that meaning that has arisen in my life, the sense of being held by spirit, all of those things, I want to bring that into the pieces that I make. And so I like to make pieces that have meaning for people, you know, that mark some kind of a what do you call it, a celebration, or a rite of passage, or just something that is like a reminder of who you are, or things like that. So, and I mean, jewelry's always been that. And there's a really interesting thing, you know. I mean, people know about wedding rings and presents when babies are born, or, you know, little pieces of jewelry for that, and St. Christopher medallions, Star of David, all of those things, they have meaning to people. But there was one that I found really intriguing, and it stayed with me since when I was studying in Durban many years ago. I did a history project, and I, through this project, discovered that priests always wear rings on their thumbs, and I found it fascinating. And over the years, I started to research more and more what this was actually about. And I finally discovered that the reason for wearing it on the thumb is so that the priests are constantly reminded that they may not use their religious power to oppress other people. And I found it completely fascinating that jewelry has that ability to, because there's memory and charge held in the metal and in the stones. Everything has, they're quite powerful elements. And so when you imbue that piece of jewelry with intention, it's held in the metal, and it holds a very powerful memory. Yeah.
Wonderful. So the craftswoman, from jewelry making to crafting your food, and now the alchemy and craft through self-inquiry and assisting people on their journeys, on this beautiful ascension journey, the homebound journey, as it were, to discovering divinity in all things. Thank you so much, Sharon. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you, Anita. Can I tell you one quick little story?
Please do.
Before we go? It's a beautiful story about a Buddhist temple in Thailand. And this temple was it was quite an ugly temple. It was made of clay, and really not very well made. It was sort of, you know, it looked like it had been sort of splattered on clay. But it was an incredibly popular temple. Everybody used to come to the temple. And after many years, decades, the devotees who used to come to the temple noticed that the clay was beginning to crack. And they were worried, and they wanted to start doing some renovations. So they got up into the temple and started to take off the clay so that they could repack it on. And where the clay was falling off, they discovered that the temple was made of solid gold. And it had been covered with clay so that when there was a big political uprising, that the temple didn't get destroyed for the gold. So it got covered by the monks. It got completely covered in clay. And I see this as a beautiful metaphor for the ego, that the ego at a particular point begins to crack and fall away. And as it falls away, it reveals the gold of who you are. Mm. It reveals the gold of your inner divinity. Mm. So, yeah, to end with that.
Wonderful. Story. Lovely to end off on that one. What a wonderful, rich metaphor and story. Thank you. Mm. Thank you, audience, for listening and joining us today to discover Sharon Peddie, one of our innerFLOW practitioners, and her services. And we are here as dedicated individuals and as a team to help grow, support you, and to find your gold within. So please reach out to us. You can visit our website portal, innerflow.co.za, and drop us a line and get in touch, or book a session if you feel you'd like to with Sharon. All the best, Sharon, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next set of events. And be well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anita, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.